You almost have to admire the efficiency of it all. I mean, really. It takes a special kind of political talent to take a functioning majority, grind it into dust, and then set the dust on fire. But that is exactly what is happening inside the Republican caucus right now. If you've been scrolling through the headlines this week, you've probably seen the phrases white-hot anger or historic low morale being thrown around to describe the mood among House Republicans. But honestly, those words are too polite. They are too sterile. What we are witnessing isn't low morale, we are witnessing a prison break. According to multiple reports from Politico, the New York Post, and pretty much every insider willing to leak a text message, the House GOP is currently undergoing a systemic, catastrophic meltdown. We aren't talking about a few unhappy campers. We are talking about a caucus that is terrified, burned out, and actively looking for the exits. We have over 40 Republicans who have decided that they would rather do literally anything else than spend another minute in the majority they fought so hard to win. And here's the part that is just rich. It is so incredibly rich. These members are running to reporters, anonymously of course, crying about how the White House is treating them. They are complaining that the Trump administration is dismissing them. They are furious that they are being treated as, quote, rubber stamps. They are shocked to discover that the loyalty tests never end. Are you kidding me? You spent nearly a decade building a political movement entirely predicated on the idea that loyalty to the leader matters more than the Constitution, more than policy, and certainly more than your own dignity. You purged the dissenters, you silenced the critics, you handed over the keys to the asylum, and now that the White House is actually treating you like the irrelevant props you volunteered to be, you're surprised? You're offended? Give me a break. The panic reached a fever pitch this week with the news about Marjorie Taylor Greene. And look, I never thought I'd say this, but Greene's exit is actually the most important signal we've gotten yet. Not because we'll miss her legislative genius, we won't, but because of why she's leaving. She didn't just retire, she was reportedly frozen out, labeled a traitor by the president. If Marjorie Taylor Greene, the woman who practically invented the modern MAGA aesthetic in Congress, can be discarded the second she becomes inconvenient, then what does that say to the guy from Ohio who just wants to pass a farm bill? It tells him he is nothing. It tells him he is disposable. So now the rot is setting in. That's the word insiders are using. Rot. A deep structural decay where fear has replaced strategy. They aren't governing anymore. They are just trying to survive the day without being targeted by their own team. They created a monster that feeds on conflict, and they are just now realizing that the monster is hungry and they are the only ones left in the cage. Let's look at the receipts, because the numbers here tell a story that the RNC would love for you to ignore. When we talk about a mass exodus, I want to be precise about what that actually looks like. In a typical election cycle, you expect retirements. People get old, they want to spend time with their families, or they see the writing on the wall in a tough district. That is normal political churn. What is happening right now is not churn. It is evacuation. We are looking at over 40 Republican members of the House who have announced they are leaving. 40. To put that in perspective, that is roughly 20% of their entire conference. Imagine if 20% of the workforce at Apple or Google quit on the exact same day. You wouldn't call that turnover. You would call it a crisis of management. You would assume the building was on fire.
And who are these people? These aren't just the moderates in swing districts terrified of losing to a Democrat. These are committee chairs. These are senior members. These are the people who actually know how to write a bill, how to whip votes, how to keep the lights on. They are the institutional memory of the party. And they are walking out the door because they cannot stand the environment that their own leadership has cultivated. But the most damning piece of evidence, the smoking gun that proves this isn't just about burnout, is the timeline of Marjorie Taylor Greene's departure. We need to dissect this because it is the perfect microcosm of the rot. For years, Greene was the untouchable queen of the MAGA wing. She could say anything, do anything, threaten anyone, and she was protected. Why? Because she was seen as the direct conduit to Donald Trump. She was his voice in the House. She was the enforcer. So what changed? Did she suddenly become a liberal? Did she start advocating for the Green New Deal? Of course not. According to the reports, her sin, her fatal error, was daring to have a discrepancy with the White House on two specific issues: foreign policy strategy and, reportedly, the release of the Epstein files. That's it. That is the entire crime. She deviated from the script by a millimeter, and the response from the White House wasn't to negotiate with her. It wasn't to whip her vote. It was to label her a traitor. A traitor. Think about the psychological impact of that word inside the conference. If the woman who spent 5 years carrying water for this movement, who took all the arrows, who debased herself on national television daily for the cause, if she is a traitor the moment she asks a question, then what is a rank-and-file member from Nebraska? They are nothing. They are cannon fodder. And this leads us to the second piece of forensic evidence: the White House envoys. Insiders are leaking details about meetings that sound less like legislative strategy sessions and more like hostage negotiations. We are hearing reports of junior White House staffers, people who have never been elected to a dog-catcher position, marching into the Capitol and dressing down elected members of Congress. One source told the New York Post that the attitude from the administration is, quote, "We don't need your input, we need your vote." This is the fundamental breakage. The Constitution, that document they love to carry around in their pockets but apparently haven't read, establishes the House of Representatives as a co-equal branch of government. It is the people's house. Its job is to legislate, to appropriate funds, to provide oversight. It is not designed to be the PR department for the executive branch. But under Speaker Mike Johnson, that is exactly what it has become. And the friction we are seeing now is the result of members realizing that they have been demoted. They aren't lawmakers anymore. They are middle managers in a failing corporation where the CEO is screaming at them over Zoom. And look at the legislative scoreboard. What do they have to show for this total submission? Nothing. We are late in 2025. This was supposed to be the year of the Megabills. Remember the promises? They were going to revolutionize the tax code. They were going to overhaul immigration. They were going to dismantle the administrative state. They had the House. They had the agenda. And what have passed? Post office renamings and non-binding resolutions. The legislative machinery has ground to a halt because you cannot whip votes in an environment of terror. When you rule by fear, you don't get loyalty, you get paralysis. Members are afraid to co-sponsor bills because they don't know if the sponsor will be purged next week. They're afraid to speak in committee hearings because a clip might be taken out of context and sent to Mar-a-Lago. So they do nothing. They sit on their hands, they wait for instructions that change by the hour. And when they try to get clarity from Speaker Johnson, they find a man who is arguably in a worse position than they are. Mike Johnson was supposed to be the bridge. He was the nice guy conservative who could talk to the hardliners and the establishment. But you cannot bridge a gap when one side is holding a flamethrower. Johnson has been reduced to a messenger boy, running back and forth between the Capitol and the White House, delivering bad news and getting yelled at by both sides. The insiders describe him as squeezed. That's a polite way of saying he has been neutered. He has no power to protect his members from the White House, and he has no capital to sell the White House's demands to his members. He is Speaker in name only. And the members see this. They see a speaker who can't protect them. They see a president who demands total submission. They see a colleague like Greene, who did everything right by their standards, get decapitated politically for a minor infraction. So is it any wonder morale is at the lowest ever? Is it any wonder there is white-hot anger? This isn't just a bad mood. This is the forensic evidence of a broken system. You have a party that has systematically removed every mechanism for internal debate and replaced it with a loyalty test that is impossible to pass. They stripped the brakes off the car because they thought it would make them go faster, and now they are screaming because they can't stop the crash. And the worst part for them? The voters are watching, the donors are watching, and everyone is starting to ask the same question. If you can't even manage your own conference with 40 people quitting in disgust, how on earth can you be trusted to manage the country?
But if you think this is just about Mike Johnson being weak or Marjorie Taylor Greene being loud or the White House being aggressive, you are missing the forest for the trees. Because none of this, absolutely none of it, is an accident.
We have to stop treating these meltdowns like they are isolated weather events that just happen to strike the Republican Party. Oh, look, another storm of incompetence. No, this isn't the weather. This is the climate. This is the engineered environment that the GOP has spent the last 15 years painstakingly constructing brick by brick, purge by purge. Let's zoom out. Let's look at the pattern of behavior, because history didn't start this morning. What we are witnessing in late 2025 is the final cannibalistic phase of a cycle that began all the way back with the Tea Party. Remember them. They came in with the same energy. The establishment is the enemy. Compromise is treason. And what did they do? They didn't just fight Democrats. They declared war on their own leadership. They chased out John Boehner. They made Paul Ryan's life so miserable he practically ran out of the building. They humiliated Mike McCarthy on national television for 15 rounds of voting, only to fire him later for the crime of keeping the government open. And now they have Mike Johnson in a vice grip. Do you see the pattern? Every single Republican Speaker of the House in the modern era has been destroyed, not by Democrats, but by the white-hot anger of their own base. The bar for what constitutes a true conservative keeps moving to the right, and the penalty for missing that bar keeps getting steeper. 10 years ago, a Reno, a Republican in name only, was someone who voted to raise taxes. 5 years ago, a Reno was someone who acknowledged that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Today, in 2025, a Reno is anyone who doesn't instantly applaud when the White House says jump. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't clear the bar.
This is the purity spiral. It is a classic authoritarian feedback loop. You purge the moderates to satisfy the hardliners. But once the moderates are gone, the hardliners turn on each other to see who is the hardest of the hard. They have to find a new enemy within to justify their existence. And here is the reality that the Republican establishment refuses to admit. They built the guillotine that is currently chopping off their heads. They spent years telling their voters that Washington was broken, that the deep state was out to get them, and that any form of governance was a betrayal. They fed the alligator, hoping it would eat the Democrats last. Well, guess what? The alligator is in the living room, and it is hungry. The insiders complaining to Politico about the White House dismissing them. These are the same people who voted to acquit Donald Trump twice. These are the same people who voted against certifying the election. These are the same people who went on Fox News night after night and told their constituents that the president should have absolute immunity, absolute power, and absolute loyalty. They argued in court, that the executive branch should be unconstrained. They argued that Congress shouldn't investigate the president. They argued that subpoenas could be ignored. And now that they have successfully installed an executive branch that believes it is unconstrained, they are shocked that it is ignoring them? It's not a bug. It's a feature. This is the strategy. We have to understand that the chaos in the House isn't a failure of the MAGA project. It is the MAGA project. The goal has always been the deconstruction of the administrative state, as Steve Bannon put it. But you can't just deconstruct the EPA or the Department of Education. To truly centralize power in the White House, you have to deconstruct the legislature.
You have to make the House of Representatives so dysfunctional, so paralyzed by infighting, so terrified of its own shadow that it ceases to function as a check on the president. And that is exactly what they have achieved. Think about it. A functioning House would be holding hearings right now on the White House's agenda. A functioning House would be negotiating the budget. A functioning House would be a rival power center. But a broken House? A House where 40 members are quitting? A House where the Speaker is a hostage? That House is useful. It is weak. It creates a vacuum that the president is more than happy to fill. The white-hot anger these members are feeling is the realization that they have been played. They thought they were partners in the revolution. They thought that if they just debased themselves enough, if they just kissed the ring enough times, they would be granted a seat at the table. But autocracies don't have tables. They have a throne, and they have subjects. And let's look at the media ecosystem that drives this, because you cannot separate the politics from the propaganda.
The members of Congress are terrified of the purge because they know where the purge happens. It doesn't happen in the cloakroom. It happens on the primetime lineup of conservative media. For years, outlets like Fox, Newsmax, and the massive right-wing podcast network have trained the Republican base to view compromise as weakness. They have conditioned the voters to demand blood. If a Republican lawmaker tries to actually govern, say by cutting a deal to pass an infrastructure bill, they are blasted across the airwaves as traitors. Their phones ring off the hook. They get death threats. Primary challengers emerge from the woodwork, funded by the same donors who fund the media outlets. The burnout these members are citing is the exhaustion of living in a constant state of performance art. They know that one wrong move, one out-of-context soundbite, and the media machine they helped build will turn its turret towards them.
So when the White House sends envoys to dismiss them, the members take it. They sit there and take the humiliation because they know the alternative is worse. The alternative is becoming the main character on Twitter for 24 hours. The alternative is a nickname from the president. The alternative is the Marjorie Taylor Greene treatment. And that brings us to the ultimate irony of this systemic meltdown. For decades, the Republican Party has prided itself on being the party of order, of hierarchy, of discipline. They mocked Democrats for being a messy coalition. They called liberals snowflakes. They projected an image of strength. But strip away the suits and the flag pins and look at what is underneath. It is a hollow shell. It is a party that has been hollowed out by fear. There is no ideological core left. Not fiscal conservatism, not free trade, not foreign interventionism. Those pillars are gone, kicked over by the very leader they embrace. The only pillar left is fear. Fear of the base, fear of the media, fear of the White House. And you cannot build a governing majority on fear. You can win an election on it. Sure, fear is a great motivator at the ballot box. But you cannot govern on it. You cannot run a superpower on the principle that everyone is terrified of the guy in charge. Eventually, the adrenaline wears off. Eventually, the cortisol kills you. Eventually, people get tired of being afraid, and they just quit. That is the lowest morale ever. It is the collective exhaustion of a party that has been running on fear fumes for 10 years and has finally run out of gas. But here's the danger. And this is where we need to stop laughing at their incompetence and start worrying about our democracy. Because a political party that's collapsing doesn't just quietly fade away. It lashes out. It becomes desperate, and a desperate party, armed with the levers of power and terrified of its own shadow, is a dangerous animal.
And that brings us to the real problem, the terrifying reality that keeps me up at night. Because while it is easy to look at this clown show, the resignations, the name-calling, the sheer incompetence, and laugh, we have to stop laughing long enough to recognize the danger staring us in the face. The collapse of the House GOP is not just a partisan issue, it is a constitutional emergency. Let's be extremely clear about what happens when one of the two major political parties in this country ceases to function as a governing entity and transforms into a cult of personality. When the House of Representatives breaks, the entire system of checks and balances breaks with it. The Founding Fathers, who these people love to quote but refuse to emulate, designed the House to be the brakes. It was designed to be the body closest to the people, the body that holds the purse strings, the body that says no to a president who thinks he's a king. But look at what is happening right now in late 2025. The white-hot anger inside the GOP isn't driving them to stand up to the White House. It is driving them to quit. They aren't fighting back. They are fleeing. And this creates a vacuum, a massive, gaping hole in our democracy. When 40-plus institutional Republicans leave, and let's be honest, many of them were terrible, but they at least understood the basic mechanics of government, who do you think replaces them? Do you think they will be replaced by moderate, thoughtful statesmen who want to reach across the aisle? Don't be naive. The people lining up to fill those seats in the 2026 cycle are going to be the people who looked at Marjorie Taylor Greene and thought she was too soft. They're going to be the people who looked at the chaos of 2024 and 2025 and thought not enough fire.
We are facing a future where the Republican caucus is staffed entirely by internet trolls, conspiracy theorists, and sycophants whose only qualification is that they will do exactly what the president tells them to do, no questions asked. The brain drain we are seeing now is the precursor to a zombie legislature, a House of Representatives that exists only to rubber stamp the executive's agenda and launch sham investigations into their political enemies. And make no mistake, this is the endgame. The White House isn't dismissing these lawmakers because they are incompetent. They are dismissing them because they are in the way. The goal of the modern MAGA movement has always been the consolidation of total power in the executive branch. They believe in the unitary executive, the idea that the president is the law. And how do you achieve that? You make the legislature irrelevant. You bully them. You humiliate them. You make the job so miserable that anyone with a shred of self-respect leaves, and you replace them with loyalists who don't care about the institution, they only care about the leader. If this meltdown continues unchecked, we are looking at a 2026 where the House of Representatives is effectively annexed by the White House. No more oversight, no more budget negotiations, no more independent voice, just a massive echo chamber amplifying the whims of one man. That is not a republic. That is a dictatorship with a suggestion box. And the consequences of this paralysis are already hitting us. We are seeing it in the economy. Markets hate uncertainty, and there is nothing more uncertain than a government that might implode at any second. We are seeing it in our national security. Our allies look at us and wonder if we are reliable, while our adversaries look at the chaos in the people's house and see an opportunity.
While Republicans are busy knifing each other in the back over who is more loyal to Trump, the world is moving on. Infrastructure is crumbling, the climate crisis is accelerating, healthcare costs are exploding. Real people, you, me, our families, are dealing with real problems, and the people we pay to solve them are busy playing Game of Thrones in the cloakroom. It is a dereliction of duty on a historic scale, and honestly, it is pathetic. But here is the silver lining. Here is the reality that they don't want you to see. This white-hot anger, this lowest morale ever, this panic, it is happening because they know they are losing. They know that you cannot treat voters with contempt forever. They know that you cannot run a clown show indefinitely before the audience walks out. The reason they are terrified of the purge is because they know their coalition is fracturing. They have alienated suburban women. They have alienated young voters. They have alienated anyone who believes in the rule of law. And now they are alienating their own members. The collapse of the House GOP is the death rattle of a movement that has consumed itself. It is a sign that the fever is breaking, even if the patient is thrashing around on the way out. But, and this is the most important but of this entire video, it only ends if we make it end. The danger of a moment like this is cynicism. It is easy to look at the chaos and say, they're all the same, or the system is broken, why bother voting? That is exactly what they want you to think. The strategy of the authoritarian is exhaustion. They want to flood the zone with so much chaos, so much noise, so much incompetence that you just tune out. They want you to look at the news, feel that pit in your stomach, and turn it off. Because if you turn it off, they win. If you decide it's all a joke, they win. We cannot afford to be exhausted. We cannot afford to be cynical. The 2026 midterms are shaping up to be the most critical course correction in our lifetime. This isn't just about flipping a seat here or there. This is about taking the keys away from the drunk driver before he drives the car off the cliff. We need a House of Representatives that functions. We need a House that checks the president, not one that worships him. We need adults in the room. So when you see these reports of GOP morale and freefall, don't just shake your head. Get ready. Take this information, share it with your friends who don't follow politics closely. Show them that this isn't both sides. Show them that one side is literally disintegrating because they chose a cult over the Constitution. The rot is real. The chaos is real. The meltdown is real. but so is our power to stop it. They are counting on us to stay home. They are counting on us to give up. They are counting on us to let the systemic meltdown burn the whole house down so they can rule over the ashes. Let's prove them wrong. I'm Ethan Cole. See you in the next one.